and welcome to another episode of The Buzzer Race. I'm your host, Nikhil Ranjan.
And hi, I am your co-host, Kyle Jane.
And for our guest today, we have David Jackson, the former NJCL Academic Chair from 2015 to 2020. Welcome, David.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so could you do a brief introduction for the listeners and then tell us your favorite food?
Yeah, so again, my name is David Jackson. I taught Latin for 18 years and was a school administrator at Oak Hall School in Gainesville, Florida. I attended Sandalwood High School, and that's how I became involved in JCL. I was a student of Miss Nancy Allen. And currently I'm serving as the head of school at Canterbury School in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Nice, nice. And what's your favorite food?
Oh, my favorite food is pizza, without a doubt.
Oh, okay.
It's proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy.
Incredible. Pizza's a very respectable choice, so I'll take it. So we can just kind of dive right into things. So as you mentioned already, briefly, how you got into Latin. Could you expound a bit more on that, like how you ended up taking Latin and
Yeah, so I actually didn't take Latin until I was a junior in high school. Had transferred to Sandalwood as a freshman, and when I was a sophomore, I got really into history and just I started reading a lot of it. Always loved mythology as a younger kid and middle school student. But I started reading a lot of history, which led me to philosophy. And I started coming across terms like a priori and didn't really, wanted to understand more about what they meant. And so that led me to taking Latin. And that was huge for me, obviously, in my life, because I met a group of students there, peers at Sandalwood, and my teacher, Miss Allen, who just really encouraged me, found Certamen and fell in love with it immediately. So, Miss Allen would do this trick where like the second week of school, she'd break out Certamen buzzers and then invite everybody after school to practice and play. And I just met some of my best friends there and loved Certamen right away and dove right into it.
Yeah, I feel like this is like a staple practice then, because I was actually telling Kyle like just 10 minutes before about how my Latin teacher, like for the Latin ones, like a week or two into school, once you got some basic vocab down and stuff, she breaks out the Certamen machine and is like, let's play around just, for fun. And it's kind of testing the waters who wants to play Certamen and stuff.
Definitely. Yeah, so that's how and it's funny because obviously we learn these tricks from our teachers, right? And that's what I've always done, right? I'm teaching a 7th grade Latin class this year, and I know in about another week, I'll probably break out the Certamen buzzers, even though we're probably going to be on Zoom for a little while now this year, but we're breaking out those Certamen buzzers and we're going to see who's really interested.
Yeah, no, it just seems to be kind of like a passed down practice. So what kept you in Certamen? Because you mentioned you met a bunch of like peers that you really enjoyed like meeting and hanging out with. And is it like the people, the game, a mix?
I would say all. I had a former player whose name is Marianne Plattrell. You guys might know Marianne, but she said to me one time, I came for the competition, but I stayed for the people. And I think that's so true of so many of us, right? So you get into it because you got the competition and you love it. And, if you think about it from a scientific perspective, what does it do for you when you hit the buzzer and you answer the question? Well, it's releasing dopamine, right? It's like this natural inhibitor, but not inhibitor, but this natural, just exponent of joy, right? But it's really a combination of those. Like I love to compete. I loved studying. My peers, my friends, we would come to practice and they would say things like, oh, did you study last night? Like, what are you studying right now? Like, and I never encountered that before in a group of friends. And, I loved learning and I loved Latin. I loved history. And I eventually started to get into other subjects as well. But it was really a combination of the competition and how much I loved it, and also my friends. And so I feel like it's definitely, not only just, competing against others, but forming those friendships that is what makes Certamen so great.
Yeah, no, I think one thing that was noted by a couple of like peers in high school who weren't necessarily in Latin, but they knew I did Latin, was like, you are so close to your Latin friends. And it's just, and we didn't even have to be sharing classes. It was just because we both played Certamen. And, the like as you mentioned, you would ask each other like, oh, what did you learn last night? Oh, do you know this fact? And it's like, I don't know, it's an interesting exchange of information that occurs between Certamen players a lot.
No doubt, no doubt.
So you joined your junior year in Latin, and so those are the 2 years you ended up playing, 97 and 98.
Yep.
And so 97, you're on the novice team, and you get second, and then y'all win 98. So you win the following year, which I imagine must feel great. And I'm wondering if you could kind of just tell us kind of like the story, who was on your team, and like how you guys like bounce back from like second, which I know for some people can be a really soul crushing thing.
Yeah.
Like, to not like win, you know.
Yeah, so my first convention was 1997. It was at Fargo. It was the first time at Fargo. It was Fargo 1. And it was great. Such a great experience. So we made it to the finals. I think we were the #1 seed. I can't remember. That was a long time ago. And so the first 5 toss-ups come by, and like we put nothing on the board, right? And we're like, uh-oh. So we rally, we get some questions, back and forth round. We get to the final toss-up, and we're tied with Virginia, 120-120. So it was Florida, Virginia, Wisconsin. So we're tied with Virginia, 120-120. Toss-up 20, passage question. This was really before passage questions were kind of like a staple thing in Certamen. Like they were just getting going as like your typical kind of questions. I don't even think there were passage questions every round at that point. There might have been.
Okay.
So it was, you know, passage question, and a player from Virginia buzzed in and guessed the name of the person in the passage, like real fast, got it. And we were so crushed. I mean, it was like, oh God, you know, work all summer. But, you know, I think it was disappointing, but that really helped fuel us for the next year. And I think that's such a great thing about competition in Certamen in general. You know, it's like, okay, you have to deal with adversity. You have to deal with disappointment. And those are great growth experiences for students. It certainly was for me. So, you know, we came back. Actually, the grammarian on my team decided that she wasn't going to come to nationals the next year. And so I had to pick up a lot of grammar, which was really good for me. And then it was interesting because I'd kind of started college. I ended up going during the summer term, which was again a great experience for me. But it was hard because, you know, I was still doing JCL stuff. So went to Amherst, where nationals was in '98, and yeah, we had a great team. Still in touch with some of them, not all of them, but you know, we did really well and played the same Virginia team in the finals and just had a really good round. I think we got like 4 out of the first 5 toss-ups, and sometimes you get a roll like that, you know. But it's so interesting. I don't know if this is true of you guys, but I have vivid memories from that round. Like I could probably I can recite almost every toss-up in that round. So it was just a really great experience. And at that time, Florida was not like huge in Certamen. We had won a few national championships, but that was sort of like the first one that kind of like let us get on a little bit of a roll in Certamen. So that was kind of cool. But the whole experience was just awesome. You know, playing Certamen, having that experience, you know, come back the next year, like celebrating with all my friends, you know, many of whom I still talk to today. Just really, really awesome experience.
Yeah, no, there are definitely those rounds where it's just like, not necessarily maybe it's at like, you know, some super significant point in a tournament, but there are just some rounds where you're just like, I know I can tell you verbatim what happened. I'll tell you if like a pin drop, like I will tell you everything that occurred in this round. Like that's really nice to hear though. I'm glad those types of memories form in JCL, and I think they're very conducive to form in JCL just because of like how much fun people are having, and it's like it's really nice to look back on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So my JCL experience was great. I did 1 convention as an SCLer, actually 2 conventions as an SCLer. I missed 2 years of convention in college. I missed 2000 and 2001. And in college, I volunteered with Oak Hall, really kind of starting in my freshman year. And we just really wanted to kind of find a school in Gainesville and give back what was so great about our Latin club. And, so it was kind of random actually that it happened to be a call. So we called up the teacher. She was awesome. She's like, yes, our kids would love to work with you. We started working with them. They didn't have a buzzer system. We got them one, or the school got them one, which is great. And then we took them to their first competition, which was at Leon High School. Which back in the day when I was in JCL in Florida, Leon High School was like the program, right? They actually won state like 16 years in a row. Like all of the national teams were comprised of like their students. And our kids actually won the first competition that we took them to. So I was like, yeah. And that was kind of the moment for me. I was like, wow, this is such a great feeling, just being able to share that with younger kids. And that's kind of fueled my teaching career for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a fair amount of like adults who are involved in the JCL scene. Anyways, it's like I had such a fun experience. I want to share it with you and like help in any way I can. Right, kind of like giving back to the community that welcomed all of us so like warmly.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was curious. So you played in '97 and '98, and you ended up coaching afterwards. And I wanted to know what you thought of the game as it changed from like when you played to now. Like, what do you think has like really been like the big changes? And do you like any, some dislike?
That's a great question. I would say both the depth and breadth of the questions. When I was playing, it was much more of like a quick speed. You didn't have these sort of layered questions, and the sort of. And I think I personally think Certamen's best when you have a mix, right, of those types of questions. But there's definitely so much more sophistication now amongst the question writers, the players, what the students are able to know in depthly, I think is wonderful. And so I tell people all the time, students who really kind of go through the Certamen program and they go through their senior year and they've been on the advanced level and successful, like the amount of stuff that the students know is really equivalent to what you would find in graduate school and even beyond, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, really impressive. So that's definitely been a big change. I think the focus on passage questions has been great. Just being a lot more in depth. I've also seen one of the question types that I love are the geography of the city of Rome questions. Sort of, the fact that we're asking the students to really know the layout of the city and kind of being in depth there. So there are so many little things like that have been enhancements in the questions from the time that I was a player.
Yeah, so after your career as a player, you became a coach for Florida, where you had a really successful career as a Certamen coach for 10 NJCL Championship teams and assistant coach for 8 more NJCL Championship teams. This is probably one of the best coaching records, if not the best. How did you do it?
Oh yeah, I mean, so it was interesting. I went back and looked at all of the championships, and I think because we've kind of adopted this model of like co-coaching a lot, and at nationals we would, you obviously had to have your 1 or 2 people who are designated as the coach. So it's kind of hard for me to number, the total, number of teams that I was like the head coach for. I think I went back and found 7, but really it was always sort of a combined team effort. But really, I think the success there had to do with creating a system in which you not only you had your yearly circuit of Certamen matches, but just always trying to talk to the kids, about encourage the kids, I think, really. So like I would always make the point of, like, early in the year, if I saw like they were doing really well in Certamen and really into it, I'd always introduce myself and say, hey, great job, and looking forward to you hopefully trying out for the nationals team, and sort of just kind of like making the kids feel welcome, I think always went a long way. And then we would do multiple practices over the summertime. and kind of give the kids guidance and support, just like everybody else, you know, who's been successful does. But I think just kind of creating that culture where the kids were excited, where they had support, where, you know, you challenge them in a good way, right? You know, to always kind of take the next step, and, you know, and that you kind of treat it like I had a saying that I always say with the kids, 365, right? So not that we're studying every single day, but, you know, we should be thinking about it, you know, like what's the next step, right? So, you know, kind of like great teams will say things like no days off, right? Not that we were like study, but just encouraging them to be their best, you know, and to always be thinking about it. About 10 years ago, I had a group of kids who really started to take, I mean, a huge step, and they would do these, they would go to Starbucks and study all the time, and they called them marathon days. And they would go and they would sit at Starbucks, guys, no doubt, from like 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. And they'd take breaks, and they'd go get lunch or whatever. But they just really loved the competition, the camaraderie, and sort of kind of, you know, started to inculcate that that ethos and that culture of wanting to strive to be better. And it was also about friendship, really. I mean, like, you know, what drives you to sit somewhere with someone and read Latin literature questions, or study the Conti or the Trip, or, you know, actually look at primary sources and things like that for so long? You're doing it with your friends, right? And so you're building that type of culture. So those are some of the things that we did. And then Ken Andino, I don't know if you guys, you know Ken. He's obviously he's been doing World Series for a number of years, but he taught at Maclay School in Tallahassee for a number of years. And we coached together. And after 1 year where we didn't do so well, we looked at each other and went, okay, we got to mix it up. We got to do something. So we started this camp called Camp WannaBuzzIn. And it was just this place in Live Oak, Florida, in between Gainesville and Tallahassee, middle of nowhere. And so we were like, what if we just got kids and went into the woods for a couple of days and played Certamen? And that's what we did. So we ran this big cabin. We had campfires. We did, you know, the 100-question round. And it was just such a fun experience for the kids. And they kind of worked up throughout the summer to do that. So trying to create opportunities for bonding, for more competition, you know, those are some of the ways in which we were able to have a lot of success with the kids.
Yeah, it seems like there's like a really big emphasis on like creating like a welcoming atmosphere, and really on having like a lot of bonding amongst the players. With this in mind, Certamen can like certainly be really stressful. So how did you as a coach prep your players academically and mentally?
Yeah, great question. You know, I think that one of the things that's important to teach the students, and I'll start kind of early on, you know, when you're teaching them early on, because it's, you know, it can be nerve wracking, as you know. I would always teach them a couple of things. I'd always teach them, you know, buzz then think, right? You know, you just got to not worry about stuff. You just got to go for it, right? And if you miss a question, it's okay. Like setting the atmosphere that, like, you know, perfection is not something that is a goal of ours in Certamen, and it never should be, because I mean, it's literally unattainable, right? I mean, you might have had a perfect round. Like if you have 10 questions, you know, you might get a score of 200. But I mean, like, think of how often you fail in Certamen, right? Like you don't get the question, right? So you just gotta relieve them of that expectation. Like it's okay if you miss questions, right? I would always talk about sort of channeling energy, because, you know, like, I remember this very vividly. The first time I picked up a buzzer, like I got so nervous, like in a competition. I was like, oh my God, you know, boom, 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 you know, your heart's beating on your chest. And I would always tell the kids, like, just focus on the moderator, right? Play the questions. Don't worry about your opponents, right? Just play the question and take that nervous energy and channel it into focus. And then really try to ease their mind about, you know, missing questions, and you know, being there for their teammates, and encouraging them in the tough moments, right? You know, because I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it, Certamen get, you know, like really super hyper competitive, and you know, competitive is great, and you want to be competitive, But we also have to remember at the end of the day, we're talking about kids, and we're talking about, a game, and we're talking about ultimately using Certamen to be something that helps us with our education, right? Because that's what it is at the end. Like, you get to the end of it, all of it, and we want to win, and we're super competitive, right? And we want to get that trophy, we want to get that dub, right? But at the end of the day, when you're able to reflect upon it, at the end of your career, or you're in college, right? You're like, wow, look at all that stuff that I learned, right? And look at the scholar I became, because of this activity. So that was a really long answer to a simple question, maybe too paraphrastic, but yeah, those are my feelings on it.
No, yeah, that's really cool to hear. I mean, because like a lot of the times, like we're all like, like us two, we're both like former players now. I guess Kyle much more recently than I.
Yeah.
But like it's interesting to hear from like a coach's perspective, like the mentality of like how you approach it and why you approach it the way you do. Because I remember Mr. Lee used to always tell us like reset every 5, because of the quarter system now. So it's like every 5 just doesn't matter what happened in that last 5. It's what matters this 5, and then once it's done, what happens next 5.
One of the things that I always told my players is it's never over until the last 5 toss-ups, right? And sometimes it is, but usually it's not, right? So like always having that mentality of like, we can make a comeback, or if you're up, right? Don't let up, continue to be aggressive. The other thing that we really started to emphasize with the kids is that, this idea of being aggressive, but also playing smart, and not being reckless. Because I think that's an important mentality for the kids. Those certain question types where like, you might not hyperbuzz always the first clue, right? And I always stress to them that slow Certamen is losing Certamen, but you've got to play smart. And we started to use this metaphor a couple of years ago. We started to say, and this is an Aspen Bombardo thing. I know you guys know her, but we would make this joke. We would say, we need to check out of the Hyperbuzz Hotel, and we need to check into the Reaction Resort, because it's definitely a much better place to be in terms of, your Certamen, bottom line.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good to hear, because I think like buzzing style is a really big thing that I don't think a lot of people focus on. I think people just kind of are like buzz when you know it, which is like good practice, but sometimes you need to start getting to like the mentality of, can you figure out where this question's going that allows you to buzz in maybe that like half a second faster than like the person who's like also like, has the same knowledge base. And that's a pretty funny metaphor to hear.
To me, that's one of the things that makes Certamen such a great game, right? Because every question can be so unpredictable, and getting the correct answer or not, like almost everybody in the room knows the answers, right? It's just a matter of finding that split-second moment where you're in a little faster, or you're buzzing at the right moment that just makes it so fun to play and fun to watch.
Yeah, so obviously you had your tenure as coaching, and still did, I guess, maybe until more recently, but you were also the academic contest chair for the NJCL during this time. And I was wondering, what kind of like led you to run for academic contest chair? Like what kind of like drove you there, as opposed to maybe like going the Certamen chair route and like going along that direction?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I thought a lot about this too when I wanted to serve the organization, right? I knew I wanted to do something for JCL and contribute. When I decided to run for academic contest chair and I was elected to the position, really, I mean, at that point, I kind of like, quote unquote, retired from coaching Certamen. Like I would facilitate, like I would hold the practices at school, and I'd read questions, but like I didn't really coach in an official capacity. But I tried to make it to as many rounds as I could and see the kids. And I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't decide to do something like run for Certamen chair, even though I would have really enjoyed doing that job. I feel like with that job, I mean, you have to be completely detached,
Yeah.
like I couldn't be the Certamen chair and like host Certamen practices over the summer and like read Certamen questions. I just wouldn't feel right doing that. So, obviously I love academics, and it was a way for me to serve the organization, to focus on the academic testing, which is very much connected with, Certamen and the world of Certamen, and still kind of like, support the kids in Certamen and still see some of the Certamen matches. It was just a really good fit for me at the time, and a good way for me to give back to the organization.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense because I remember there are some things about like the Certamen chair that I forgot. There are certain things you can and can't do. You like, and how involved you want to be in Certamen is changes a fair amount in terms of like the actual competition and getting to see stuff and whatnot. So that makes a lot of sense. And I was curious, as like the academic contest chair, were there any goals that you specifically had in mind when you decided to run and you ended up getting elected? And was there anything you didn't get to in your time that you were like, I still kind of want this to occur? And like, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, on both of those questions, and I'll explain that. So when I took over, I mean, the system was pretty good as it was. Laura Long, who was my predecessor from Tennessee, did a really great job. My focus was really twofold: quality control, right, making sure that the tests were good, they were well written, they were well researched, they were balanced. You had, I think sometimes students would tell me they would get frustrated in moments where like maybe you had like, oh, I just had 90 really easy questions on this and 10 hard ones, and like then it's kind of like a random guess 2 or 3 as opposed to who gets first and second place, right? So I focused on that a lot, trying to make the questions kind of balanced in 25 question segments on a 100 question test. We made a couple of structural changes. We added Greek language, which was a huge, I think, accomplishment getting that done. And I got to credit the misses on that a lot. Dr. J, she did a lot to really work on that project. And we changed some things with Greek derivatives in that it used to be kind of more of like a largely English vocab heavy kind of test. Like if you go back and look maybe 7 or 8 to 10 years ago, still really good content, but we sort of made it a little more robust, more like your traditional Latin derivatives contests. And we also included the Greek words in the questions. And I'll go ahead and credit Jose Molina for that. He wrote the lion's share of those tests over the past 5 years and did a great job with them always. Let's see. Yeah, those were I think the sort of big structural changes that we made in terms of, so not many changes, but just really focusing on making sure that, the other big thing is, that I'm really adamant about, is making sure that every question that's written can be sourced, right, in a source book, right? I know my students would always be frustrated if they got a test and it was like, well, where'd this stuff come from? Like, I think giving students the opportunity to be rewarded with the things that they've studied is really important, and just helps to, grow their confidence. And then the one thing that I started to work on this past year that I really wanted to get done, that wasn't able to get to, was producing a list of student created and generated sources that we can post on the NJCL website per category. There's been so much in the past 15 years that students have produced that's really good. And I wanted to help to try and localize that on the NJCL website. So hopefully that's a project that I can help to contribute on, or that can get done in the future, because I just feel like the more we can get resources out to students, the better, because so much right now is dependent on your teacher and how much knowledge they have of this material and where to find the material. So just making that public so that everybody can get the great notes that students have produced over the past 15 or so years would be awesome.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to hear, because I think especially once the online COVID-19 sets in and everyone gets thrown online, the Certamen scene has gotten to evolve in the sense of like the interaction space. So we have a lot more people from across the country getting to interact with each other for the first time. And I know that resource disparity has been a big topic, and it's been like, how do we go about solving that problem? And I know one of the discussions actually, which you mentioned, was trying to localize something that everyone can access, because right now, like if you just coincidentally go to a school that doesn't have good access to the source books, that's just kind of that. You don't really have much of a solution unless you like financially invest yourself in buying the source books and doing something like that.
Right. And if you're a student, so much is dependent upon being exposed to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, just having the public availability of some of those things, I think will be really good for the kids.
Yeah. So I was wondering, in terms of the quality control and, like how to adjust like difficulty and stuff. One question that's kind of always come up, at least like in terms of test writing, is do you think there is some ideal top score that you want, like out of a test? Like obviously if everyone can get 100, that'd be incredible.
Yeah.
But like if there's some like, like, oh, I think a 95 or like a 90, or like, do you think there's some like nice middle ground for that type of like high score that you would like to see, or you think it's like a good aim?
I think so. I think something in the low to mid 90s is really the sweet spot. Now, I'm always excited if a student can get a perfect paper or a 99. Like, I mean, those are like, I never try to write tests to say like, oh, no one's going to get 100 test, right? Like it was always really important to me at the end of the day to say, okay, this is a fair test. Is it possible for a student to get every question if they are really, neck deep into their source books, and you got to throw a couple primary source things in there every once in a while, but always tried to really focus on writing fair tests. But I would say, somewhere between 92 and 97 would be kind of the ideal. What I always tried to avoid was, and it happened on Myth a lot, 99, 99, 99, 98, 98, 99, 97, 97, 97, right? Because people know stuff and they're good, but like, you want to write questions that are differentiators, not unfair ones, but ones where, you've got more of a spread, in the distribution.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. I think that's a good range to go for. And I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of the tests tend to fall in that. I feel like some years, like certain tests can be kind of variable. Like I think history was one that always just seemed to, I mean, it was variable both on, who are your, people taking the test, and then also whatever the test was. But that was the one that I always was like, the score could vary pretty wildly. But I mean, I think that's also probably the nature of history. But I think that was the only test that I remember I was like, the like shifts were always so weird. But I think for the most part, like, I mean, the quality control and like the difficulty control seemed to be really consistent. Like, I think that was always super well done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that was definitely a big focus. And every once in a while we had outliers. Like a couple years ago, because I look at the score distributions every year and go, oh, okay, are these too high? Are they too low? And like we had a Hellenic history one year, and I think high score is like a 79 or an 80, and I was like, ooh, yeah, no, that's not good, right? We got to make sure that next year we're focusing on writing a more balanced test.
Yeah. So, from your perspective as a teacher now, I'm really interested in hearing some of your present thoughts on the JCL. But first, where are you now in like your Latin?
Yeah, so as a head of school, obviously I'm not teaching as much, but I am teaching a 7th grade class that meets 3 days a week, which is kind of cool how they do it here at Canterbury, because for these students, it's their second language. So they all take French or Spanish initially, and then they take Latin as a second language, which is really cool. And so, where am I in my teaching? I mean, I'm kind of back where I started. I started as a middle school Latin teacher. I love 7th grade because I feel like at that age, they're so malleable in a good way, right? So like if you catch their passion and enthusiasm, you can set them on a course to really loving Latin and JCL and having that experience. So I'm really excited for this year. I have 11 students, And I'm kind of figuring out, like, you know, the things we want to do. I mean, obviously there are going to be some Zoom opportunities. You know, Indiana has a pretty active, you know, JCL, but, you know, so many things are up in the air right now, you know, whether or not the state, uh, you know, conference is going to be able to meet, whether there's always a January Certamen, and you know, is that going to meet? I think the fall forum, the equivalent of it, is going to be online at this point. So, you know, and you know, these are first year students who've never been exposed to JCL. So like, how do you, you know, share the magic with them, you know, not in person? So I'm still struggling with that a little bit, figuring it out. But you know, I'm hoping that I'm really hoping that we'll have convention live next year. We'll see how it goes, you know. But that would be awesome if I could get a couple of them out to California. You know, that'd be real neat.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am in my teaching. You know, gonna work on building a JCL here. You know, it'll be a little slow at first, but you know, after a couple of years, I think we can get there.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Do you plan to be involved in the INJCL?
Yeah, I'll definitely be involved in Indiana JCL. I don't know, you know, in terms of like, I don't think I'll run for like a board position or anything like that, but I'll just help wherever I can. Jeremy Walker, who's the state chair, used to be on the national committee. So, and he does such a great job. And so, yeah, I'll help out and contribute. Definitely probably won't, you know, run for an office or anything, but, you know, I think, you know, it's interesting because the convention theme this year, you know, talks about, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it talks about sort of like cultivating your own garden, right? And like, tilling your own farm. It's a Plautus quote. I can't remember the Latin at this point, but, you know, I'm really feeling that theme, you know, like, I feel like, you know, this for me anyway is kind of a time for me to like really focus on, you know, the JCL chapter here at the school at Canterbury, and kind of really work with the kids and get them interested, and, you know, kind of real grassroots kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to help out wherever I can. I don't know how like super involved from like a state board perspective I'll be.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good that you're still going to help out though. So in this past 2020 NJCL convention, Agon came back for the first time in years. How did it feel to see Agon back? And do you think there should be any changes implemented for future Agon tournaments?
Yeah, it felt great to see it back. I was really excited. You know, I think the students were excited. You know, we've got a lot of people who are willing to invest time in that project. In terms of changes, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd love to get your guys' feedback on that. I mean, I like that it was kind of all inclusive, one level. I like the fact that students from different states got to play with each other. So I'd like to continue to see it be a little different from Certamen, you know, and not so state focused. You know, it's tough because, you know, there are so many things in the schedule of convention that finding time to implement new contests is always difficult. So, but I think if we keep it to a 2-hour time block, and you know, we're able to run it on one day and do it, I think it, and we're able to secure the rooms, I think it can be successful. I think it can be a staple of convention. Who knows where it will go in the future? Like, will it grow? But really, I'm just excited that there are kids who, you know, get a chance to highlight their studies in Greek. I think it's going to encourage more kids to take Greek. I think it's going to encourage more kids to study Hellenic history and Greek literature and Greek derivatives. And so that in and of itself is a really, really good thing.
Yeah, this year I actually played, and I had a lot of fun. It was a really nice experience, and I don't take any Greek classes, but it was a nice opportunity for me to compete in the Greek language.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anything from your end that you guys see like could be different, or you'd want to see done differently with the tournament?
So,
I really liked it. But yeah, go ahead, Nikhil.
No, I mean, like, so as like I guess someone watching it from the outside, because I helped write a bit.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I thought was like something that probably just needs a basis for is the language, just because not necessarily everyone competing knows the Greek language, and like I guess just trying to find some like nice basis of resources that can be given to the students, I feel like is a big thing, because I think like coming in, it was a bit harder to manage, but I mean also it's like first time coming back, didn't really have too much time to like set up and tell everyone ahead of time like here are all the resources and stuff. But I think that would be something that would be pretty good for the language side of things at least. And I like the across level playing. I think the all level is really nice because you get like even if you have like random like students are like, oh, I want to play this, but they're playing as like they don't have a signed up team. You can just cross level and there's no issue. Like everyone just gets to play and meet each other. I think that was really nice.
Yeah, I think that, and I agree. Like producing some sort of grammar syllabus and some resources, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. So we just talked about Agon, and we can kind of now jump back to Certamen. And we were wondering, like, so as someone who obviously has played, has been a coach for a while, and has just, I mean, been involved in the scene in general for such a long time, what are your thoughts on, like, the current scene of Certamen? I mean, we touched on this a bit before, but I mean, I guess, like, more specifically, are there any changes you still want to see, or you think, like, this was a really good thing that we've kind of implemented into the current state of Certamen?
Do you mean just online stuff or just Certamen in general?
Yeah, a mix of like, what do you think of this online environment in the current scene, and then also just in the game in general?
Yeah, I think the NJCL did a really good job with the online format. As good of a job as anybody could have done, right? It was interesting because in a lot of ways it felt like Certamen at nationals. It was all the procedures, like the professionalism of the tournament, right? I always felt like that's something that NJCL has done really well. So that was great. In terms of the future of the game, I guess my biggest concern and hope is that we will find more ways to grow the game, and to find ways for more and more teachers and students to become exposed to it and involved in it. You know, I've had some experiences with teachers over the past few years where like they didn't play, but they got involved in it, and they saw what it could do for their students. So I think just maybe having more workshops, more outreach with Certamen. We did a thing about 10 years ago where in Florida we saw that like there weren't as many schools involved in Certamen. It was basically just like 2 at the time, and I was like, okay, this is not good for the game in our state. So we did a teaching Certamen workshop, and we invited schools in, and there was student run, and it got a little momentum and helped. So I think more things like that we can do, but just outreach, growing the game, because it's such a great activity for kids, and I think anything we can do to help with that is good.
Yeah, and I was wondering, so in terms of this, like, online environment we have now, where a fair amount of the tournaments, I guess, unless some, like, vaccine or something gets us back into live Certamen, I was wondering, like, do you think even after we go back to in person, whenever that will be, that we should maintain this online environment for the game?
Yeah, I do. I think there's opportunity there. And so let's think about it from this aspect. School X, let's call it Tom C. Clark High School, or, Brookfield Academy, right, wants to hold a Certamen tournament, but you're going to do it on Zoom. I mean, we've all spent time traveling, the country to go to universities to play Certamen. That's kind of caught on in the last 10 years, which has been awesome. Shout out to my guy, Ben Van Gelder, for doing that first at Yale. So that's been great. But like, we're talking about access. So having a Zoom tournament, where you could have kids from Canterbury School in Indiana, or Roll Call School in Florida, or Flint Hill School in Virginia, like coming together for an online competition. That's awesome. So I think we should continue to incorporate that into the fold of Certamen. I definitely think once we're able to be live again, like that should be the primary focus. But, let's try to find ways to do virtual Certamena, because I think that can be really a neat thing for the students and can just help grow the game.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about the whole online environment, and a big thing that came to mind kind of in terms of online Katana, which you mentioned, is accessibility. And nationals has kind of always been there's there's this packet you have to pay for, and it's a pretty expensive packet that not every student can just pay for. I think I don't know the attendance numbers for this year, but I think it was over 1,000, right?
Yeah.
But we have 30,000 NJCL members that seemingly exist, and I'm wondering in terms of this Certamen aspect on the national level, do you think there should be some NJCL sponsored Certamena, so we have more people getting to play these types of national level tournaments, even if they can't afford to go to the actual convention?
Yeah, I think that would be great. You guys are probably familiar with NAQT and Quiz Bowl. You've probably seen that or maybe played it. They have a really good centralized national apparatus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that Jenny Luongo has talked a little bit about this, about finding ways where NJCL can kind of support question writing or creating universal question sets for
Mm-hmm.
different tournaments. But yeah, I think that would be great to have some sort of more centralized JCL. This is an NJCL sponsored, Certamen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that takes resources and labor and hours, but I think there are a lot of people out there who would be willing to contribute to that kind of project. Definitely. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I with just how JCL is, I'm sure that there are more than enough people who would be like, I am willing to write questions to set this up. Because I think a mirrored style thing can help a lot, especially with newer and upcoming local areas where, the teachers are just they're not inexperienced in terms of their knowledge, they're inexperienced with question writing, and having these packets set up ahead of time that they can read to students and be like, hey, look, we have this questions from a national organization who does this, and that would, I think, help a lot in those scenes.
And a national schedule of things, or a centralized hub, on NAQT, you can go there and you can find all the tournaments that are
Mm-hmm.
happening in, basically all around the country that are sponsored by NAQT. And I will say this, I obviously have a ton of experience with Certamen and JCL, and I'm starting at a new school. And even for me, that would be really useful to know, oh, in late September, there's a Zoom tournament that I could get my kids into, right, for the first time. And it's oh, this is a real beginner tournament, and it's for novice players. And I think that would be something that would be really helpful to be able to grow the game.
Yeah, because I think it's a lot of word by mouth now, which I feel is a very I'm sure that's how things started, but I think how NAQT has kind of advanced in a more sophisticated way of how they've set this all up, I think would be a really good implementation, I guess, for Certamen.
Definitely.
Yeah. So with that, we've talked for a while and heard various pieces of information, advice you've given. Do you have any one takeaway from your experience, either as you want to recommend to a player, a coach, someone involved in the administrative scene? Do you think there's any one takeaway you really have from JCL that you kind of wish others know as well?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I have so many. I guess I guess I'll say I'll give you two things. First of all, JCL has tremendous capacity to change lives, right, and impact them for the better, and not just in Certamen, but in other aspects of the organization. And so, there are people who get into all kinds of different things and love it for different reasons, and I think that's one of the really cool things about JCL. So it has tremendous capacity to change lives, right? And then number two, in respect to Certamen specifically, and I'm borrowing this from Howard Chang. I don't know if you guys know Howard Chang from Virginia. You know, we did a workshop at convention, oh God, it must have been Wake Forest, 2012, it's a long time ago, in which we were just talking about the value of Certamen, and he said to the audience, you know, Certamen creates classicists. It creates, it takes kids and creates such an interest in scholarship in classics that, you know, many of the former players either major in classics or they become really involved in it to the extent that they're, you know, getting PhDs or master's degrees, or they're going into teaching. So it creates lifelong classicists, and even people who might be doctors or attorneys or business people, like they still read Latin, right? You know, they still really keep up with classics. They might come back to convention. You know, I'm thinking of like the Chris Sloans of the world, or, you know, the Ben Van Gelders of the world, people who just like, you know, really love classics because of Certamen.
Yeah, no, I think those are incredible takeaways, and I think they are really like key things I don't think a lot of people think about. I think a lot of people can like feel it, and, you know, they like have a sense for it, but I don't think many people, like, you know, actually could like maybe verbalize like this is what kind of comes out of the JCL and Certamen. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on this episode of the Buzzer Race. It was a lot of fun getting to hear your insights, your opinion, and your like story as a player, coach, chair, and just getting to hear your thoughts. I think it's always nice to hear what people have to say about what they're so deeply involved in.
Yeah, guys. Well, I appreciate the invite to come on, and love talking to you about Certamen and all things JCL. And thanks so much for doing this. It's been great.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on.
All right, guys. Well, take care. Yep. See ya.